I'm super excited today for our tiny desk adventurer, Matt Leslie, who is a brother from another set of parents completely in a totally different part of the world, to be clear. But Matt and I are both marine mammal people. We bonded at numerous marine mammal conferences. It's been quite the adventure in terms of our friendship, but also in appreciating each other's work. And as you can imagine, there are things we do that are very similar, and it's just very exciting to have other like-minded, excited, kind of strange friends out there who, have the same amount of appreciation and gusto for the things that we do. So without too much more, welcome, Matt, to your Tiny Desk
Thank
Adventure.
you.
Very excited to have you here. And let's kick start. I'm curious, right? So when you fly the drone over the blue whales, right?
Yeah.
What's your biggest fear? Okay, the suspense is killing me.
In that moment, the biggest fear is probably it's probably like hurting someone, right? Like, so there are like really, really sharp spinning blades on the drone itself. So we have to be very careful. We're launching at sea on a moving vessel that's bobbing up and down in the waves. It's definitely possible to hurt somebody. So we always wear our protective equipment. We wear helmets. We wear Kevlar gloves. And they go all the way up to our elbows, and we have to hand launch it and hand retrieve it. So I think my biggest concern is, hurting someone. Secondly, the second biggest concern is not bringing the drone back. So you can imagine a very expensive piece of equipment like that that's flying over the ocean, that is reliant on me as the operator, but also all of this intricate electronics. Something could happen, and things have happened, but we've always recovered the drone without hurting it. But there have been moments where the blood pressure goes up, and it's quite intense. So those are the two major concerns, and thank goodness, knock on wood, nothing has ever happened.
Yeah, that's great. So for those of you who are joining in, you might be wondering what we're talking about. Well, if you watched Matt's Tiny Desk Adventure video, you'll know that this man uses small drones to measure big whales, okay, blue whales, and they've done some fascinating work with the blue whales in Chile. The results aren't out yet, so we can't tell you what it says, but it has been a really great tool to sort of look at a different population and try to figure out, are they actually different to the other blue whales out there? So that's sort of the premise of what we're talking about. But as you know, this Tiny Desk Adventure live chat is always a little more fun, a little more like delving deep. Understanding deep-seated fears like losing drones and chopping people's heads off. But so when we've been doing some drone work as well. We've been launching a bit higher because we want a larger view, and it's kind of crazy because the winds, like even the slightest bit of wind, really makes a big difference. Do you I don't know. I kudos to you, because it's kind of a bit scary. The winds, people don't realize how at sea it's open enough that there's the wind influence is a lot stronger than if you're on land and things. What other what other kind of things do you can you say what are the differences if you are putting it out on land or at sea? What are the differences you see?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly different concerns when you're in the different environments. The good thing about being on the ocean is that you don't have as many things to run into in terms of trees or buildings or light poles or things like that. So it's more open space, which is good. But you're absolutely right that the wind can be very tricky at sea. It can change very quickly at sea. And so I've been on expeditions where we spend months trying to get an opportunity to fly over whales. And because of the concerns that I mentioned earlier about personal safety, as well as needing to bring back the equipment, we've not flown because of wind conditions or whatever. And as I mentioned in the video, the drone's not waterproof, so we can't fly during rainy weather either. So yeah, that's a big one. The other one that's really interesting, I've never had any issues with this, but some people have, are seabirds. So some seabirds are highly territorial, and they can, well, birds in general, some birds in general are highly territorial, and so they see another flying object, and their immediate response is to attack it. Luckily, again, fingers crossed, knock on wood, I've never had any issues with that. I've certainly had big, like, frigate birds that will come and, like, like, what the heck is that? What is that? And they'll, like, do circles around it, and then they'll take off. And the whole time I'm sitting there, just waiting for the moment where it just gets bashed. But luckily, no issues. So yeah, those are some of the major concerns.
But also, like, so I know you use a custom-made drone, right? So I have a question about that too. But also,
Yeah.
Do you have the homing function on this drone, or have you guys disabled it because it's so pointless out at sea? And can you talk a little bit about what the homing function does?
Yeah, absolutely. So we do. There is a homing function on the custom drone, and just to be clear, I've actually transitioned to using a commercially available drone in recent projects.
Okay.
So, and it actually, to be honest with you, it simplifies things quite a bit. So the homing function is basically, as Asha said, a sort of fail-safe where you can use the GPS location of where you launch to have the drone return to that location. So there's a little bit of an issue there because oftentimes on the water, you're as a boat, you're moving, right? You'd be drifting, or you might be motoring forward to sort of get near the whales. So that starting point may not be helpful at all. It may actually be way behind you. And I have had an issue. In fact, my last trip in Panama, I was using a new drone, and I hadn't disabled the homing function. So the battery got below 40%, and we were already bringing back the drone. We were, in fact, like right here. My student was about to catch the drone, and the homing function went off, and it said returning to home, which was about 1.5 kilometers behind us.
God.
So we have some amazing video of this from another intern who was filming the whole thing as it happened, and there was a lot of cursing. There was a lot of, we would have to mute the whole thing. So the homing function can be useful, but can also be a problem. So now what many drone operators are doing now is they have a boat mode, which basically turns on has an active GPS that's constantly logging the position of the tablet that's attached to the drone controls. So then the home becomes the tablet, basically, which is much more useful than the takeoff position.
Yeah, that's a lot more useful and smart. I didn't realize that was available. But is that on all drones or not? Do you know?
I don't know. But I do know that I just disable the whole function, to be honest with you, because I get scared when things are too automatic. I'm like, I'd much rather have total control over things. So I don't want that to happen if possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. So when we were using our drones, well, one of the things, like I said, was we were flying it pretty high because we were trying to get like a bird's eye view of all the boats around and stuff. So not just the whale, but we're really trying to get a much broader view. And it's so tricky because there's a lot of glare. It's like bright hot sun, and then like, where on earth is this drone? And to be very clear to everyone in the audience, I am not the one flying it. I have someone who is a professional who's flown at sea many times, because it's just not a risk I'm willing to take. But then you can't even see the drone, and then like, you're like squinting into the sun, your eyeballs are burning, you're trying to find this drone, you're trying not to lose it, and then it starts to, like, you're going down to 40% battery and you need to get it back. But the only thing, so the drone operator is like, okay, it's over the blue boat, and you're like, there's 3 blue boats here, so like this is really right? So you're like, we got it. But touch wood, we also our drone came back fine, so that's nice.
Okay, nice.
But
yeah,
there's a lot of systems.
It is. It can be really nerve-wracking. It's funny because many of the photos from the video came from a great photographer, Chilean photographer named Danny Casado, and he's just a wonderful human being. And at some point during the trip, he was like, "Matt, you need to be having more fun. Like, you're in Patagonia, and this is beautiful, and like you're working with blue whales. This is amazing." And I'm like, "Yeah, It's amazing. But I've got like basically a Toyota Prius like flying over the, the same cost as a new car. Like it's stressful, okay? Leave me alone.
So you're like the fun guy on the boat, right? At that time, like everybody wants to
Yeah,
be
exactly.
really
Exactly.
glad I'm flying drones with you. So
Yeah.
what's the longest blue whale you've seen using your drone?
So these Chilean blue whales are much smaller than the largest of the blue whales. So they're on the smaller side, like the pygmy blue whales, and so they're not quite as big. I've not flown over blue whales in Antarctica, but I have seen the Antarctic ones, and they're just enormous. I mean, they're totally huge. We didn't get measurements from those, so I can't say what those were. But yeah, the ones in Chile are not quite as big as the big Antarctic ones.
Yeah. So to everyone out there, what you should know is that the blue whales we get out here in Sri Lanka, this is confession time. I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you the truth, guys. The blue whales we get out here are also pygmy blue whales, but it's kind of silly, right? Like, I mean, they're pygmies that grow to like what? 20 feet, 20 meters or something, or whatever,
20 meters.
65 feet or something, right? I
Hmm.
mean, if that's what a pygmy is, then I'd be happy to be a pygmy, is really what I'm saying.
Right.
But
Right.
apparently, and then like the big Antarctic blue whales that Matt's talking about grow to about 30 meters. But it's something, I mean, it's so interesting that I see our blue whales and I'm like, that's big, right? But I would love to see an Antarctic blue whale and just to realize that there's something that's even bigger. Like, that's kind of
Yeah.
an interesting feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. So
That's kind of crazy.
I love the term pygmy blue whales, like the fact that that's such sort of an oxymoron, right? Like it's a big, but it's still bigger than your house, like it would still smash a city bus. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's the Antarctic ones. You see these amazing photos from Antarctic whaling stations where like it's hard for me to even fathom how big these things are. Like, there's people sitting next to them and they're just like, just enormous. Sadly, we lost many of those really large ones in the whaling industry because they tended to target the largest of the blue whales. So I wonder, at what point, if we're recovering our whale populations, will we get those really, really big ones back again?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great point, and actually relevant to Sri Lanka. It's similar. We have elephants out here, and
Hmm.
there was a lot of hunting during the colonial period. Trophy hunting for elephants was like a big deal, and
Yeah.
there were individuals who were like killing 100 elephants or whatever, and it's just nuts.
Oh,
And they were
gosh.
targeting the elephants with the tusks. So now our
Yeah.
tuskers, there's a the percentage of tuskers in our population is actually really, 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 really small. They're very, very
Right.
rare as a result of that like elimination, right? So that's exactly
Hmm.
with blue whales. It's the same thing. It's the biggest ones that got hunted. So we basically removed that entire sort of gene
Hmm.
pool, or the vast majority of it. That's what we sort of see. But
Right.
so like your video was about blue whales and drones, but you do so many other cool things when it comes to whales and dolphins. And I would love, so my field team this season when we saw some spinner dolphins and everyone got excited.
Hmm.
And then one day there
Hmm.
was a photograph on Instagram, and I showed them. It was a video actually on Instagram of the really fun spinner dolphins. The ones you work with, the funky dorsal fins.
Funky
Um,
dorsals. Yeah.
yeah, can you tell us
Yeah,
a little
they're
bit
weird.
about them? Yeah, like
Of course, yeah, yeah. So this is a group of dolphins off the Pacific coast of Central America. So this is off of Panama, Costa Rica, in that area. And I did my dissertation work studying the genetics of these groups. They had been defined as new subspecies, meaning that they're sort of on their own little evolutionary trajectory, and they're different from the other ones we see around the world. And if you look at them, it's obvious that they're different. They're just pretty visually different. The dorsal fin is, instead of facing backwards, it faces forwards. And they have these weird like humps on their belly, and then their tail flukes, which are normally sort of flat. The tail goes up and down. The ends of it, which are like a little wing, the tips go up, which is really weird too. So So my project was on the genetics of it, looking at these different groups to try to see if the genetics matched up with what we see in terms of the appearance of the different spinner dolphins. And previous studies have basically shown that that there was no difference despite these appearance differences among these different groups. But I did a sort of a genomic approach, and we found these differences that matched up really well with the appearance of these different subspecies. So that was my role in it, but I'm also really curious about why the heck they have these weird attributes. Like no other spinner dolphins in the world have these backwards facing dorsal fins,
No.
and or this weird like belly thing or the upturned tail flukes. So I'm really curious. We think that it's probably due to some sort of sexual selection mechanism whereby it's only the males, the oldest adult males who have these characteristics. So similar back to your sort of tusker example, the many species have this characteristic where the males will be the ones who are competing for females, and they'll evolve weird structures like the peacock tail, things that seem strange and maybe like not very advantageous. And we think that this is probably the case with the spinner dolphins in Central America, that the males have evolved these strange attributes either for show, like they're trying to attract a female, or for competition, like for somehow those characteristics show the other males that they're like bigger and better than the other males. But the God's honest truth is we have no idea. Like we have no data to support any of those hypotheses really. It's probably sexual selection, so it's probably something in that realm. But the why we really don't know.
So that's really interesting, right? So if it's so typically in sexual selection, right, what happens is a trait evolves, right, depending on your ability to outcompete others, etc. You get stronger. But like if they're born with these, I mean, are they born with backwards? So to everyone in the room who's wondering, like, if you just look at a normal dolphin, right? Like if its beak is out this way, or its face is this way, it has a dorsal that usually curves backwards, right? But these ones are super weird. Like, and when I showed my field team this video, I was like, spot the difference, and they were like, what's wrong with this dorsal? And I was like, I know, right? Like, it's super weird because it actually faces the other way. It's got the straight edge on the front, and it's curved at the back, towards the back of the body, right? But like, do you see young ones, any juveniles with the backward dorsal, or no? So it flips in adulthood?
Yeah, see, exactly. So we think it's probably a similar. So in terms of the physiology and ontology, so how it changes through time as an individual, it's probably similar to killer whales, in the sense that the male killer whales are the ones with the really tall dorsal fin. It could be up to 3 meters tall, it's huge. But the juveniles, before they reach sexual maturity, they look like the females, so they have a normal size dorsal fin. But the thing just keeps growing and growing and growing as the males become more mature. We think that that's probably the case with the dorsal fin of spinner dolphins, in the sense that it starts out like this, normal, and then as the male grows, it sort of becomes the back edge grows more than the front edge, and it sort of becomes triangular. And then as they get really old, it goes like this. So the back edge just keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. So again, what sort of advantage that would give you, I don't really know. Like, we don't see them really competing a whole lot. They're not running into each other. They're not like fighting. But so I put in a proposal, and it actually got funded, but then it got shut down by the federal government for a number of reasons. But to try to figure this out, we wanted to 3D scan some of the whole bodies of the animals to try to understand how the water flows across these weird features. So if anybody's got a lot of money and wants to fund that, that'd be cool.
You hijacking my bonus
but
right now.
No, but it's possible that those backwards dorsal fins somehow make the males more agile. So they're breeding with females in this weird 3-dimensional world. Maybe it makes them better at just like sneaking up to them and flipping underneath them to do the breeding. Like, I don't know, just
So
a
interesting.
hypothesis here.
Yeah, so interesting. Just to respond to someone, yes, this will be recorded and it will be available on website, social media, and etc. So you know, it will be around. But like when you photograph these spinner dolphins, do you ever see any like with like more pointed dorsal fins, like in the transition somewhere in the middle? Do you see that?
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So we do see there's a mix of them in the school. So you do see some that have sort of the normal ones, some that are triangular, and some that are more forward facing. So it's weird, and part of the reason that I'm now doing work in Panama. So that's where the hypothesis came from, that maybe these things have evolved, these sexual selected characters, to be really good at being very agile under slow moving water or slow moving speeds. The other thing that's really interesting is I mentioned we've got the backwards dorsal fin, but we've also got these weird upturned tail flukes. And if you next time you go to the airport, once this whole COVID thing is over and we actually start flying again, next time you go to the airport, look at airplane wings and notice how many of them have these little winglets or little wing tips. There's actually a really strong reason why we've started to put wing tips onto airplanes now, and it's to make them more efficient. So had we been watching these dolphins, we would have known this from the very beginning, that if you have a little bit of upturn at the end, it actually makes things way more efficient. So instead of losing all of the velocity of the air or water as it goes off the wingtip, you actually capture some of it and use it for forward thust. So yeah, it's bizarre. We think that that's probably the compensation. So they've evolved these upturned tail flukes to sort of be more efficient, to overcome some of the inefficiencies maybe of having backwards dorsal fins. So again, these are all hypotheses with no data. So let's try to figure this out.
Yeah, my gosh, it's so interesting. It's like a poor patchwork doll. Someone was like, "Oh, yeah, this is fun. Oops, sewed this on the back the wrong way. Well, now we gotta make up for it somewhere else." It's like this constant, like trying to make you better. But I mean, clearly, I mean, seriously, the dolphins in the video definitely looked like they were having fun. So I guess,
yeah, they're still really good at spinning. They're still like, yeah.
So you do see big spins as well. So I mean, I guess they're
okay.
Oh,
yeah.
Why are we so worried about it? Why, if it's working for them, why should we worry about it, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
But so this is great. We've gone from drones and measuring blue whales to and really identifying different populations using new technology, which I think is really cool, and non-invasive new technology, right? And you talked about it, how like there's so many different ways to do it, but this modern tool is just so it's cost effective, but it's also non-invasive, which is really important. And then
that's right.
We talked about these crazy spinner dolphins that you work with, right? Which is a whole other bizarre kettle of fish. But you also did some interesting work when you were out at the Smithsonian, right? Like, and can you tell us a little bit about that and a little bit about the lab that you were working in, and like Nick's lab, and sort of like what the basis of that lab is and what they do, and then like kind of what your role was in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I did a postdoctoral fellowship for a couple of years at the Smithsonian, and my position was sort of split between. I have this problem where I'm doing too many things at the same time all the time. So like because I have so many interests, I'm so excited about everything. But so Nick's lab, Nick Pyenson, who's a curator of fossil marine mammals at the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C., his lab studies whale evolution. And so they use mostly paleontology and morphology, or the form of whales, to sort of understand how they evolved through time. Like whales have this amazing story of starting out as land mammals, part of the artiodactyls, or the even-toed hoofed ungulates, and then over 50 million years transitioning completely from land animals to marine animals. So Nick's lab is really interested in the pattern of how that happened, but also the process of how you get from A to B, and what are the weird changes that have to happen for a thing that looks kind of like a...
Interesting.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I mean, I think that, having these different experiences and having these different tool sets is really great for the current position that I'm in because, you know, um, a big part of my job now is communicating my science to my students, and you never quite know what's going to resonate with students, and so having these different stories can really help bring in students, and I think it broadens the perspective and it makes things more interesting. The other thing is that I love about whales specifically is that they are such a great example of evolution. Oh. There's such a great example of evolution, and like there's so many really cool little mini stories along the way, and then you have such a great overall story. But then there's also the conservation aspect, and I know that's really close to your heart. How we take the knowledge that we've been able to gain and turn that to making a better relationship with our marine environment, and using whales to sort of engage people, who are really the problem in this whole situation, to really reevaluate our place in the marine environment. And so again, being able to teach not only the evolution side but the conservation side in the sense of using these animals as a great example.
Yeah, and I think that's what it is. I mean, we both care about the conservation. We both use stories and experiences in these ways, and I think it's so powerful. And I think in some ways, the problem in science, I feel like quite often, is that we stories are so non-personal, right? Because we're taught to write in
Right.
third person. We're taught to communicate like the instrument was deployed, but who deployed the instrument, and so I feel like it's like really like, it creates this separation, whereas like if you can bring these stories of your real life examples, that's when people connect to it and get excited and feel like they can relate and it makes sense. And that's, I mean, I'm sure there's people out there who are now like kind of really, I mean, they knew you did drone stuff with the blue whales because that's the video you did, right? But like you've taken them all the way on this journey of like, let's go 50 million years back in time, because that's kind of where your interest begins as well. So and I think
Right.
that's so cool. And even toward ungulates, what's the closest relative of the blue whale or the whale? Like that question just didn't come out right, did it? What's the closest living relative of whales on land?
Extant living
Extant,
relative.
that's the word. Yeah.
Is that for me or for your viewers?
You, because nobody else can answer.
For me?
Yeah.
For me, is the hippo. Is the hippo.
I wonder how many people knew that. How many of you knew that the hippo is the closest extant relative of the whale today on this planet? I mean, you've seen a hippo, maybe on video, maybe in a zoo. Do they look like whales? Good question. I mean, they like water.
That's right. That's right. They have funny noses, right? The noses are at the top. Yeah. I have a bad dad joke about a hippo.
Yeah. Okay.
No, save it.
No, do it.
Okay.
Please.
No,
I don't want to have to
save
suffer
it.
alone. Do it. No, use
Okay.
it.
Okay. What's the difference between a hippo and a Zippo?
Oh gosh, I don't know.
Do you know what a Zippo is?
A lighter, right?
Okay. Yeah. So here's the difference. A hippo is really heavy. A Zippo is a little lighter.
Oh gosh, man.
Oh, so bad.
It's so bad.
So bad.
I'm struggling. But, the good thing is that there's people in the audience who didn't know that a hippo was the closest extant relative of the whale.
That's true. That's true. Hopefully they learned something.
I mean, they might not forgive you for the hippo is heavier and a Zippo is a little lighter. I cannot believe it.
Just a little lighter.
Yeah. I mean, it just, I have to say you're still lucky. You're lucky we're still friends based on the fact that you're doing that. So,
ouch. Okay. All right. I have only one joke per interaction.
Yeah, per interaction. But tell me about, like, I don't know, like, what is like one of those, what do you think was your turning point, in this whole journey of yours? Like, what was it, that moment when either you were like, I want to kind of know more about this particular thing, or I don't know, like, was there like a magical moment in your story? I mean, mine had poo in it, but what was yours?
Oh, Interesting. I'll leave that. I'll leave that alone for now. A couple of things. I think that I have a good advisor who is a science journalist, and she's really a fantastic person. And she and I were talking about this at one point, and I told her about this time where my mother had taken me grocery shopping. This was probably in like early teens or maybe even earlier than that. And you know how kids are grocery shopping. They're just like, why am I here? Like what's going on? And my mom sent me to like go to the book aisle, like, right, just like go pick out a book, like, go read. And so I went to the book aisle and I found this book by Jacques Cousteau, and it was about like a book about whales. And so I started thumbing through it, and it had some amazing images of underwater, under whales from underwater. And I was just so captured by it. I grew up in Oklahoma in the middle of, like the Great Plains of the United States, right? There's no water except for man-made lakes. And so the idea that this thing existed in the ocean seemed so foreign to me. It was almost like reading about aliens on another planet. And so I was just sucked in at that point. My curiosity was going crazy, and like I couldn't get enough. And so I went home. My mom ended up buying me the book, and I think mostly to appease me, to like, just be quiet, just take the book, let's go. And then so I went home and I grabbed the encyclopedia. This is before internet and Wikipedia and all that. So I'm grabbing the encyclopedia and I'm like, whales? What is this? Like, whales? So that was a big thing. And then, and just in growing up, I realized that there was, I was pretty fortunate early on, and I had a very open-minded parents, and they did a lot of stuff with us outside, and like we did a lot of camping trips. And I think pretty early on I realized that my love of the world was outside. It was being outside. It was, trying to understand, answer some of these questions that I was curious about. And so I got lucky, in starting early with writing to different scientists and being like, hey, can I volunteer? Can I come hang out? Can I learn from you? And so after one summer of working on a bird project, that I think was also pretty transformative, although I didn't know it at the time. Just in the fact of like, people actually do this type of stuff for a living. Like, you can make a living trying to answer questions about the natural world. At the time, I was just like, this is amazing. Like, I had no idea. And then in terms of the whale thing, the hook was really set when, from that bird work, I made a contact with someone at the Pacific Whale Foundation who had since moved to Australia. And and I wrote to that person, and that person said, like, if you can get here to Australia, you can come and volunteer for our program. And I had been saving my money from summer work and that sort of thing, and I had just enough money to buy a plane ticket to get over there. And I did it. I was just like, what a chance, what an opportunity. And again, I think it comes from a place of privilege to be able to do that, and I completely acknowledge that. And I didn't know it at the time how good I had it. And thanks to my parents for just like being okay with me, going over there. But then, the first time I saw a whale in the flesh, it was just over. It was just like my curiosity was so full. Like, I'm just so full of curiosity at this point. Like, I can't unsee that. Like, it changed me. And so back to your point about objectivity, I'm going on a long rant here. But we said we're taught as scientists to maintain objectivity and to let our data speak for us. And I think that that is obvious now, and we've been trained to do that. But I think that we shouldn't hide our passion for why we do the things we do, and we shouldn't hide our love for the things that we study, because I think that's gotten us to a place as scientists where, objectivity actually becomes a slightly negative, in the sense of communicating our story and communicating the results of our finding and communicating why people should care about the natural world. So yeah, I'm all about that. That's my story. Sorry that took so long.
No, but I ask this kind of question every time we have a Tiny Desk adventure. with someone, and it's fascinating because there are some common themes. You know, there's a supportive team behind you, so it could be your parents. In many cases it's been parents, but I do believe different people have different support groups, so
Absolutely.
you know, and that's one thing. It is this most all the tiny desk adventurers who've like kind of continued on these paths were grown, like kind of brought up with the outdoors and that sort of sense of appreciation for what's out there, and just like kind of rough and tumble and, you know, running around and picking up insects and bugs and just really immersive, right? Like, I mean, it really mirrors my own life as well. And then you know, taking risks, that's the other thing, like these risks which other people were like, I mean, there is, and I always like to rephrase some of these statements. It's like, sure, there's a certain amount of privilege involved, but taking a risk is not like, it's not a privilege. It's you're putting yourself on the line, right? So I think it's important for us to remember that, like, we make decisions, and you know, you packed up and you went to Australia. I did the same thing. I packed up and I was like, they gave me a chance to go to New Zealand. I mean, I created a chance to go to New Zealand to kind of volunteer, and then from there to get on the Odyssey, the whale research vessel, right? Like, they were like, if you can be here in 24 hours, and I was like, gonna be there, right? And you take this risk, and I was like, what's wrong with you? You know, you have something going on, but you just up and go. And then even moving back to Sri Lanka, like, I always wanted to come back, but like, I remember in 2015 there was this moment where I was like, I'm done, and everybody was like, so what do you, and I was in Santa Cruz in California, right? And everyone was like, so what are you gonna do when you go home? And I was like, I don't know. And they're like, so it doesn't make sense, you've got a job here. And I was like, I know, but like, it's the moment, like, I need to go and I need to do this right now, right? So I think we can't underestimate that sense of, it's not a foolish risk, it's a calculated risk, it's a subconscious calculation, but the knowledge that this step is going to take me even 1 centimeter closer to where I need to be. And I think that's a really powerful reminder for all of us, you know, that we can, but we have to choose to as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, and you're right in terms of the risk factor. You know, I could have taken my savings and invested that, and probably been more wealthy at this point now. I mean, it was small, like, it's like a tiny bit of, you know, enough to buy a plane ticket to Australia. But that's the risk involved, right? Like, I was certain at that moment that, like, I had to check this out. Like, I just had to. So I was going to try to do whatever it took to do that. And the risk involved was, like, I'm going to own this. Like, if I go there and it stinks, I'm out all that money. But at least I have that knowledge. And I wanted to touch base, circling back a little bit about what you said about the outdoors and you know, getting dirty and playing with bugs and all that stuff. I mean, so this is something also that I'm trying to incorporate more in my teaching, because I see many of my students haven't had this experience growing up, and I think that's completely normal. Many people don't have this experience, but I feel like I want them to at least experience it in a small way of, like, you know, instead of a classroom today inside the air-conditioned building, we're going to take it outside, and we're going to learn the things that we were going to learn, but we're going to do it outside. We're going to let the outside world try to change us, you know, or like, we're going to experience it in a meaningful way. And I think it improves my teaching too, in the sense that I'm more excited, you know, when I'm not surrounded by, you know, 4 flat walls. And I think the other thing to remember is that, you know, we are, as conservation biologists, are asked to, you know, to fill an important role, to bring our science to the table for decision makers. And I think that if we don't do that with some sort of passion and love for the things that we're doing, like, who else is going to do that, right? So, you know, we can say, you know, we have to remain objective, and we have to, you know, not put ourselves in front of the data. That's absolutely true, but nobody else is going to speak up for the oceans or the elephants or the lions or except for us, you know? So, like, I think that's really important.
I think you're so right. And I think, you know, I always remind people that data engages the head, but like these emotional stories, that's what engages the heart, right? And I'm not talking about, like, you know, kind of like extreme kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna like starve myself to death until you do this. And that's one way to do it. It's certainly not my style, right? But you can be passionate, you can exude passion, you can be excited about what you do, but you can still be an objective scientist, right? You can be, and as a scientist, that is a job. It is objective, as in you let the data speak. Like you set the experiment out, you ask the question, and you look for the data, and then you look at what the data says, and the data might give you the completely opposite thing of what you thought you were going to find, but that's what it says, right? And so it's really important for us as conservationists, as scientists, to kind of, our work should be kind of really deeply ingrained with like that objective science. But then once we have the results, it's up to us to turn them into that story that can captivate people's minds and imaginations and hearts, so that we can actually make that change, right? And I think it's so important for us to remember that and to maintain that. And if you're not passionate, like, what's the point of living, really? Like, if you don't love it,
what's the point?
Right?
What's the point? Right. Yeah, and I exactly, and I see this sometimes in our graduate education, right? Going through getting a PhD, is that it's so rigorous, and that's really, really important. But I see many people who just kind of have that passion, like, beat out of them, in the sense of, like, you can't talk about the why it's important to you. You can't talk about, like, the stories of the little things that were impactful in your journey along the way. Like, don't talk at all about that. Like, just stop being subjective. Like, it's okay, right? It's like healthy. We're very complex, intellectual, emotional. Like, we have all of these different ways of knowing, and we're not allowed to talk about those. Like, it seems a little silly. But I'm optimistic that that's changing, and that we're embracing more of more compassion for those feelings, and more compassion for the impact that they can have in terms of communication. So, I'm optimistic about that we're changing because of leaders like you.
I think. Oh, well, I mean, we all have a role to play. I don't know about leading, but I mean, I love what I do. I do it because I love it. I have this feeling inside me that I can't control when I get excited about the stuff I do. And, I'm surrounded by people who are also passionate, which I think is really important. Like, surrounding yourself with people who are passionate, who are driven, who are excited, who want to create that change. Because, I mean, it's hard. It's, doing it on your own is one thing, but, like, knowing there are people out there, and, like, like I said at the start, like, people who are as crazy as you, people who are, like, willing to stick their necks out, people who are willing to take those risks. And I think that's such a powerful thing, and it's a powerful bond, right, for all of us, and it's something to depend on, right?
Yeah, and as we've talked about in terms of our support network, I mean, that's what we need, right? We need we need certain people who are help us through those sort of challenges and provide that support. And I'm very fortunate to have you as one of them. It's been fun to be your brother from a different mother, and to be part of. Yeah, exactly. So it's been fun.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and I think, I mean, I think that's the other thing about being passionate and excited, and about what you do, is that you start to find those like-minded people. And I think that's a key thing we can't forget, right? That passion is what brings people together. That excitement is what makes you come together, and you're like, you know what, I have this great idea, or I'm super excited about this project. And I'm not even working on your project, but I can be still super excited about it, right? Like, and that's all you need to, like, feel like I can keep going. And it's the same, it works both ways. And I think I just want everyone in the audience to remember this passion, this excitement, something you don't want to lose. You want to sort of always, like, fan that flame, whether it means finding people who you can sit and talk to, or like-minded people, or going somewhere to experience something. There's so much more to life than putting that money in a good investment, so you have more than a bicycle when you become an adult. Clearly that was not me. I have a bicycle. But I have a great life, and so
and I think it's also important, as you know, that, like, it's not easy, right? Like, there's a lot of steps along the way that you choose you know, maybe the less financially secure way, or maybe the less, you know, the less intuitive way. And so it's not easy. And the fact of the matter is there's a lot of forces, big forces in this world, and small ones too, like these small people that are in your lives that, you know, that are working against you. And so you're kind of like the fish swimming upstream a lot of times. And it's a job. You know, that's the other reality, is that, like, you know, analyzing statistics and p-values and like writing scientific papers is not fun. Like, there's not a lot of fun about it. So, you know, I think it's important to embrace the fact that it is a technical job. Like, there's a job part of it, and with any job, you're going to have parts of it that you don't like. So, you know, it's important to embrace those, as well as, you know, seek passion in whatever you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Okay, so it's longer than I promised. I apologize.
Oh
I
no,
know
it's okay.
you have the family out there.
I'm loving this.
I know. So there's lots of hearts flying through, so people are loving it too, which is always really
Oh,
nice.
good. That's
Instagram
great.
Instagram automatically switches off after an hour. So if that happens, we just relog in. That's fine. But I do want to ask if anyone out there has any burning questions. We have a very multifaceted marine mammal enthusiast in the room right now. And, you know, like, it's rare to meet people who have, I mean, such, like, has such a diverse suite of tools, I think, is kind of the thing. And having spent time not just in the field, so he works in the field because he gets out there with his drones. He works in labs because he does genetics, and then he works in sort of like spaces with old, like, fossils and, like, you know, paleontology labs, completely different kind of labs. And I think that's a very, very unique combination of stuff. And I think if anyone out there is curious, has questions or anything, you know, we have a couple of minutes at least where you can throw in some quick ones, because I have totally taken up all the time. I feel a bit guilty. I should have probably put this out there before, but
Way to go. Way to go.
Great host. 3 points. New learnings. Thanks so much for sharing. That's Navika. Navika is he's our 8-year-old ocean hero. He's amazing. He's like, yeah, really knows
Awesome.
stuff about the ocean, loves the ocean. Sometimes so he's one of those people who isn't always surrounded by people as excited about the ocean as him. But I told him that there are people out there, and so he's learning to immerse himself into spaces where, with the help of his mom and the support of his mom, in those spaces where he can meet those like-minded people. And I think that's really helping to fuel his flame, so he doesn't feel like like, I mean, it's hard sometimes when you're always surrounded by people who don't really appreciate what you do, and sometimes you can feel a little bit. But, you know, like, it's a great job that his mom's doing, because she's helping him to navigate these spaces, which means his excitement will continue and he will grow into someone who will make a difference for our planet, for sure. There's, like, no doubt about it.
That's awesome.
Very excited.
Yeah, I would reiterate that that's amazing.
Yeah.
I would reiterate that it's a great time to be curious about the world, because with the internet and with all these social media outlets, it's much easier to plug into the world of scientists and other things than it ever has been. So yeah, I urge all of you young people to keep doing that. And if you can't add your question here, you can always direct message me or find me on Twitter or what have you. So please definitely reach out, even if it's after the live chat here.
Yeah. Back. Oh, see.
Hey, we're back.
Instagram was like, right, you guys, stop it. And we're like, haha, we're coming back. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to make Instagram angry, but we did have a question from Isha, who works with us. She's from Mumbai, and she actually did her master's at St. Andrews, and she did bioacoustics on Isha, did you do bioacoustics on spinners? I can't remember fully, but she asked if you've ever seen the Eastern Tropical Pacific in mixed species groups, the spinners from ETP.
Yeah. So let's so mixed species groups, definitely. So they do tend to hang out with spotted dolphins as well. So those are the two most commonly. The whole reason we were doing this study is because those are the two most commonly targeted dolphins in terms of bycatch, and so and I say targeted, selecting those words carefully because they are actually encircled. The dolphins are encircled to catch tuna that swim below the dolphins. So spinner and spotted dolphins you will often see in mixed schools. Occasionally there'll be some bottlenose dolphins, offshore bottlenose dolphins in those, some other things. And then just to peel that away a little bit further, these are different subspecies of spinner dolphins, and within this one region you have multiple subspecies, and we will see those in mixed groups as well. And that's where it gets really tricky because the differences between the subspecies in this area are fairly subtle. So for the genetic analysis, we actually had to remove the groups with the samples, the genetic samples that were from these mixed school groups, because sometimes it's very difficult to tell whether you've got one subspecies or the other subspecies. So it gets pretty challenging in some of these areas because you have overlap in the subspecies and there's probably a little bit of mixing going on. But yeah, so great question. In fact, that was one of the major challenges with doing the genetics, was trying to sort out the sampling to make sure that what we were looking at was actually the pure subspecies.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, and her bioacoustics research was on spinners and spotted dolphins. So
nice.
I guess she was just checking to see if the backward dorsals were also as accepted by the other species. And I'm happy to know that they were, even though they have this funky, weird situation, which is still upsetting me, by the way. I might have nightmares about that. It's like having ears backwards. I don't understand. But anyway.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I used to joke that it's like, when you're walking through the line in heaven, when you're getting your your arms put on and your ears put on and stuff, they just accidentally turned around backwards during that portion, and the factory just stuck it on backwards. They're like, just keep going, keep going.
Too late. Just keep going.
Too late.
That's awesome. That's a great question and great answer. Does anybody else out there have any quick questions? I don't want to keep anyone waiting much longer, but if you do have any questions, this is your chance. I'm just saying. The man's been busy. He's come from a camping trip. I can tell you've been out in the sun because you've got mad farmer's tan.
My mad tan lines? Look at that. Yeah, it's really so sad. Crazy. Yeah, yes. And the watchman, you usually have a really good watch tan line.
Yeah.
So
I'm really into that.
This is serious content we're providing here.
I know.
For your listeners.
Like, great. This is what we signed up for. Awesome. This is how they waste time. This is what our real life is, guys. This is what scientists do. So just FYI, you're getting a real snapshot of what it's like to be a scientist. You get really excited about really random things. You usually, in our field, everybody usually loves the outdoors because a lot of our work is outdoors. And yeah, good old watch time, Megan Rose. Exactly. See, good appreciation for her watch time. Mine's faded by the way because of this time indoors with Corona. But anyway, it'll come back.
You really need to work on that. You need to work on that.
Just put my hand out right in the sun, just to get it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Got rid of yours. Yeah, mine never really goes away. I think it's actually a tattoo. But yeah. So okay. Here we go. We got a question. Are you trying to combine your work in genetics and drones to capture whale blow? It's not God.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Penny. That's awesome. So yeah, absolutely. So I'm not a microbiologist, so I do not study the microbiome, if you will. So this is like the viruses and bacteria and all those other tiny things that live in and on whales. But I do work with people who do that kind of work, and so that's exactly right. So part of our study in Chile and part of subsequent work that I've done is collecting the blow or the air that comes out of the whale's nostrils or its blowhole. And that provides a whole nother level of anxiety in terms of the actual field sampling, because now we're flying the drone instead of flying at 100 feet or 30 meters or whatever above the whales. We're now flying it at 2 meters above the whale, and there's a lot of moving parts. It's like the whale, it's the waves, it's the wind, it's the snot that's flying up. It's very nerve-wracking. But the truth is the value of that sample is really important for understanding the health of these animals. So just like you and I would go to the doctor and get a throat swab or a nasal swab or whatever to look for various viruses and things, we can do the same type of thing with whales to understand their health. And so I have done that and plan on doing more of it. Again, I don't do the microbiology part. I tend to take those samples and send them to other people who know that world much better. But yeah, the tools are just amazing. The fact that we can use these drones, again, non-invasively, so we're basically, flying above them, they don't even know we're there. To collect biological samples from them, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Great question.
And to think there was a time in history where we thought the only way to find out more about them was to kill them, right? So
Absolutely.
we got time.
Yeah. And that wasn't that long ago. I mean, and we're still working to try to recover many of these populations that were completely decimated by the whalers. So yeah, it's not that far in our past.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And like modern technology just makes it, I mean, it's not necessarily easier, but it does make it less invasive, it's less harassment, and there's so many other things, and we can just learn so much more about the secret lives of these whales and the more elusive parts, right, about their lives, which you can't find out if they're dead, that's for sure. So I think it's really cool.
Actually, yeah, it
Okay,
actually
so
turns out that they're very interesting alive. It actually turns out.
Oh my God. Thank you for interrupting my deep and meaningful statement with that. But it's true. They are.
Yeah, but also they're really interesting dead too. But yeah, like the paleontology stuff, like that's another window into their evolution that like, you couldn't get unless they were dead, I guess.
Yeah. But then if it's natural death, it's a different thing, right? We don't need to be killing them.
Right.
Find out what
Absolutely.
Them. But it's true. Okay. If there's no other questions, guys, I'm gonna let you guys go. It's been a good one.
This was awesome.
It was awesome. And I actually I did tell you it would be about 30 minutes, but it clearly took longer to, you have just way too many things going on, okay, in your life. And I think it's very exciting for the audience to know. I love the parallel stories in terms of like how people get to where where they are in life. It's so interesting for me to see those parallels. I love also just hearing different people have different ways of living, and like your diversity I think is so exciting. Like I came and visited you in Nick's lab, and that was so fascinating for me, just seeing sort of like all those fossils and sort of kind of getting that's the first time I've sort of been in a space with people who know about the fossils talking about them, and I think it was so exciting for me. Your drone work is obviously very fascinating. We do something similar out here, so it's always nice, and it's blue whales, which is exciting. The spinner dolphins, oh goodness, those dolphins are gonna like be the death of me, these backward dorsals, but it's all cool. So yeah, and it's been amazing for me. And as much as we do spend time and we we talk about these things, I think it's always really nice to have this really concentrated time, and I think everybody's had a great time. We're getting lots of great comments and compliments. So people are super happy, and I really appreciate you taking time out. I know you were camping, and you've got your two little girls in the background. I can hear them, who lent you their easel and their whiteboard for the disc adventure, and taking time out from your family and your work, and you've got so much going on. But really, and I know we've hounded you a little bit in the last couple of weeks, but
no, that's okay.
Now you're free, Matt. Now you're free.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. It really is a pleasure, and please do don't hesitate to ask questions. Those of you who are still on the chat, and same thing with you, Asha. Like if you have follow up, just let me know, okay? Because it really is a pleasure.
I love it too. And for everyone, just don't forget to follow at Okiewhaler. So OKIEWHALER.
That's me. Yep.
Yeah, you can follow Matt. You can see what he's on about, what he looks like when he's not sitting in front of a screen. He might look different. You never know. And you can follow him on Twitter. He's pretty active on Twitter, so that's a good conversation space with most people. Most scientists are pretty chatty on that. So if you have questions, that's another way to catch up with him, and he will answer. So So with that, I want to say thank
Absolutely.
you very much to everyone who's in the room, who came back when we got cut out. This will be recorded, so if you missed it or missed part of it, it will be on the website along with all our Tiny Desk adventures. Don't forget, we'll have a new release on Wednesday, and we also have a marine conservation conversation coming up next Monday, MCC. For those of you who love to follow us and who have been attending, it's the 20th that week, so that's really
Wow.
exciting. Yeah, we've been doing this
Cool.
for a while. So with that, I want to say thank you so much, Matt, once again, and of course we'll chat soon.
Yes, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you all for hanging out with us, and thanks for the invite, Asha. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.